So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of SecuriTEA and Crumpets, where we will host security professionals each month to talk about different security topics. I am once again drinking a nice smoky Earl Grey from Fortnum and Mason. So, join me if you're on the West Coast like I am. I hope you will join me for your early morning caffeine intake. Or maybe something a little bit stronger if you're on the East Coast or, of course, other parts of the world. As this is the second episode, I'd like to introduce you to our next guest, and that is Ryan Dewhurst. Ryan Dewhurst is the founder and CEO of WPScan. Ryan completed an ethical hacking degree at Northumbria University, and during that time, he also created the Damn Vulnerable web application, which many people have used to learn the fundamentals of application security, such as cross-site scripting and also SQL injection. Ryan has extensive experience leading and consulting on various different security domains, and since 2014, he left the rat race and founded his own security consultancy, Dewhurst SecuriTEA. Welcome, Ryan. Welcome to the stream.
Thanks, Lewis. Good to be here.
So how are you doing, Ryan? How is today?
I'm good. I've got a little bit of a cold today. So if I sound a little bit bunged up, that's why. But apart from that, no, doing great. So I'm drinking tea as well today, and it's Taylor's of Harrogate.
Very good.
It's English breakfast tea.
It's definitely a bit later than that where you are right now, but that's fantastic. So just to give pre-warning before people wonder about the audio and potential delay, Ryan is in the middle of nowhere in France, so if you do see some disconnects from his visual, do not worry too much. So let's get started. We've got some hey Ryans in the chat, so everyone's happy for you to be here, Ryan. So let's get started and talk about your university time. So you did a degree in Northumbria. Tell us about that.
Yes, I did. So Northumbria University is in Newcastle in the northeast of England. They did a course on ethical hacking for computer security. So I was living in Newcastle at the time, and I saw that the local university was doing this course. And I didn't even have any GCSEs from school or anything like that. So I put myself through a fast-track college course to get the relevant qualifications, such as GCSE Maths and English. And then I applied for the university course. I got rejected initially, because I didn't have all the required qualifications. But I found the tutor's email address online and emailed him directly and begged to be let on the course. And then, he accepted me onto the course. It was a 4-year sandwich course. So my third year, I worked at Random Storm, that no longer exists anymore. And that's where we met. And it concluded everything from networking, a little bit of web application security, programming, consultancy type work. So working for real businesses, creating reports, solving business problems for them, and that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed it. I saw your first episode where you debated whether university degrees are essential to work in cybersecurity or in IT in general. And I don't think they are 100% necessary, but I think they do help, and it certainly helps. Personally, they helped me. So but you don't need a degree to work in security, I don't think.
Yeah. So I think I was in a similar position as you, though. Like when I finished my school, I played way too much World of Warcraft, so I didn't really attend that much school, and when I was actually going to school, I didn't do very well in maths. So I ended up having to do a foundational college degree before I could even make it to university, for example. So
I think it's the same thing that I did. It was a foundation.
Like a 1-year degree at college, and then you moved into it. So I think I was in the same boat, and I feel like I probably wouldn't be doing IT right now if I didn't go to college at the time. I'd probably be doing something probably a little bit different.
I feel the same way. I think university course, not only did I learn things, but it also gave me confidence in myself, to have even if it's just a little piece of paper, it does psychologically give yourself, but me anyway, it gave me personally some confidence. yeah, I feel the same. I'll probably be working. I think I was working in call centers and bars and restaurants before
Exactly
I
this.
went to university. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same. I was working in bars and restaurants as well, and a bit of retail. So the one thing which I found really interesting from like at least your time at Northumbria was that you also during that time, which was I guess late 2000s, where you created DVWA. So obviously that's the Damn Vulnerable Web Application, and I'll just paste that into the chat for everyone. Yeah. So what were your thoughts? Or I remember using DVWA like nine years ago now, and it was a really good introduction to like application security, and it was a good talking topic when I applied to Random Storm at that time. So what was your process around creating DVWA? How did that actually process begin?
Yeah, so it was my first year at university, and at the time there was no plan to include web application security in the course. And web application security is really where my interest lied. So I wanted to try to teach myself as much as possible about web application security. So I thought the best way to do that was to start creating vulnerable PHP pages, such as that are vulnerable to SQL injection or cross-site scripting, and then to practice exploiting those vulnerabilities um, on a local network. Back then, I don't think we even had bug bounties, or not many anyway. So it wasn't even possible to go out there and experiment on live servers in a legal way anyway. So then I just started putting all these pages together. So I had the SQL injection page, I had the cross-site scripting page, and I started to build a web application around it. I released it as an open source project, and I did a couple of local talks to local user groups about it. And I was lucky enough for a professional web developer to take interest in the project and help me develop it further to what it is today. And since then, we've had like a ton of contributors. Got Milk and DigiNinja, who's currently managing the project.
Yeah, I noticed it was transitioned over to his GitHub repo the last time I checked it out. But it's fantastic that
Yeah, social engineered me.
I mean, that's a very big problem in security right now. Or I mean, at least in like the kind of repository space where people will kind of take over dead projects and then just add like either malware or add something malicious to try and steal people's stuff, which is like really interesting in some space.
I trust Robin.
Oh no, I trust Robin as well. I mean, maybe we shouldn't. No, just kidding.
Yeah, maybe we should. I'll ask for it back, see what he says.
I don't think that's going to happen. So, did you expect DVWA to become so popular? And at the same time, like, did it help you get any kind of job offers, or kind of help you transition into anything? Did it give you like street cred? Did it like what did it provide you?
Yeah, so at first I was just creating it to learn web application security, and then I thought maybe others could use it to learn as well. Did I expect it to get so popular? No, I don't think so. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to measure its popularity. Like I think it was popular, but how popular it was, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it certainly helped with people getting to know my name. I think it probably, trying to think now. So I was on the poll.com Security Weekly podcast. I'm not sure if that was because of DVWA. I think it was. And then being on that podcast, I got interest from the Random Storm company, who gave me my first security consulting job. So I think, yeah, probably DVWA did lead to my first professional job in consulting. But yeah, and it's a great conversation starter as well. If you go to security conferences, that's the DVWA guy. Now I'm the WPScan guy. Yeah, used to be the DVWA guy, and because it's for beginners, so it's a good conversation starter. Like, hey, I couldn't do this particular, I couldn't exploit this particular vulnerability, or could you give me any tips on that, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a good conversation starter, and it's still popular and used today. I'm not sure if it's as popular as it was, or it's hard to gauge these things, but yeah, it's still used today. It's still very useful. The good thing about DVWA is the older it gets, the more vulnerable it gets. so the more useful it is. But yeah, thanks to Robin DigiNinja for taking the management of that on, because there are a lot of new users who need help, getting it running and with some of the basic vulnerabilities on there.
Yeah, 100%. There are obviously new ones that have transitioned out that are like kind of modern as well, but you still see PHP today. Like, even like Facebook has Hack and like all these other things. Obviously, a superset of PHP. But that PHP is not going anywhere as much as people say, and there's all these fantastic frameworks that still are written in PHP. I haven't reviewed it, and WordPress as well. Yeah, I haven't looked at PHP in a long time, to be honest, but I know one of my friends who still dabbles in the world of PHP quite a bit.
Yes, I got back into PHP with the whole WordPress stuff. So.
Well, let's shift gears and let's talk about your consulting time. So obviously, you finished during your sandwich year, you took you did a full-time position at Random Storm, and then you basically ran Random Storm's kind of web security team for a while. I don't know if that's the way I perceived it, as technically I used to send all my reports to you. So technically,
that's the way it felt. That wasn't my official position, but yeah, I guess I was sort of running the web application team there, which wasn't, it was only less than a handful of people, but yeah.
So let's start with what kind of things have you done in consultancy? So obviously we'll talk more about Dewhurst SecuriTEA in a little while, but throughout your consultancy career, what kind of projects have you worked on primarily, and what have you enjoyed?
Yeah, so Random Storm doesn't exist anymore as a company because they got bought up by a couple of other companies. Yeah, while I was there, so my main focus was web application security. So we did a lot of testing for some of the biggest retailers in the UK, some of the biggest Premier League football clubs as well. And so my main job was to do web application pen testing and security audits, and we also went on site to present findings to these big companies. I did dabble a little bit in internal pen testing. I didn't really enjoy it because you had to be on the road all the time, living out of hotels and off Burger Kings and stuff. And yeah, it just wasn't really my skill set. And what I really did enjoy is we did, I think I was on 2 social engineering engagements for some very large UK businesses, which was very enjoyable. So we're doing stuff like lock picking and trying to scoot under cameras and that kind of thing. And yeah, so the social engineering side was pretty interesting, but I only got to do a couple of engagements.
Got it. Yeah, I also did some I guess red teaming / social engineering engagements, and while they were really enjoyable, they were the most. I was stressed out the entire time. So,
I wasn't too stressed. Bothered me is one of the engagements we were outside trying to break in the building. It was January in London. It was freezing. We were outside for 3 hours trying to break into this building, but yeah, no, I find it. Yeah, I wasn't too apprehensive or nervous about doing it. We were successful on that one, so it was pretty cool.
Nice. So obviously we just talked about what you enjoyed. Let's talk about the pain points. So what have been pain points? And obviously I'm sure everyone already knows if they have been in consulting. What are the pain points of being a consultant? Obviously being on the road is one of them, but what else?
Yeah, so if you have to visit, if you're doing internal pen tests, I know a lot of penetration testers are constantly on the road. They don't get to see their family. Eating crap takeaways, living out of hotels, that kind of thing. Yeah, so for me personally, it was doing web application security. I wasn't doing that so much, but the business stresses on doing trying to get out 2 reports a week, or sometimes even so from a business perspective, the client wants to pay as little as possible. So you may be only doing 1 day tests on this web application. You've got to get the report out tomorrow and then start the next test. So those kind of pressures were pretty hard. and obviously it's hard to keep the quality up if you're throwing out reports all the time. But yeah, apart from that, I there's not much I didn't like about pen testing. It was just mainly the repetitiveness of maybe finding the same vulnerabilities all the time, or maybe working with clients that were just doing a security audit as a checkbox exercise, like hey we've been tested sort of thing, and didn't really care about the results of the test or implement or take on board any of your findings. I guess that's very frustrating. And you're testing them, say, every year for 5 years, and you just finding the same thing, and you're like, oh, what's the point sometimes? So I think, there are downsides to consulting, but I think in most cases the pay makes up for that. In most cases, but yeah, I think overall it's a pretty good job.
Nice. Yeah. So I agree. Obviously, the client, and obviously you want people to care about security as much as you do, and sometimes that's hard when people are just doing it for like an audit scan or like just an audit kind of every year, and if they don't do anything with that data or information, that can be very painful. And of course the report writing is one of my largest pains in consulting myself. It's very especially when you get very proficient at like languages and frameworks and different technology, and you can spot vulnerabilities a lot quicker, which means the reports just get exponentially bigger. So it's it's very hard to keep motivated when you have to do such large reports sometimes as well, compared to even just pushing them out the door in 2 days kind of thing.
Yeah, you see, I don't mind the reports. It's just as long as I have the time. I don't like to rush reports. If I have the time to do a report, I really enjoy doing them. But yeah, if I don't have the time, I find it frustrating, and you feel like you're not pushing out the quality that you could be doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I do mainly enjoy writing the reports.
I mean, I do. I like
reviewing them, reviewing someone else's report.
I don't mind writing reports in the grand scheme of things. It's just more you want to I guess from my personal opinion, I like to make sure that I'm giving the best to a client, and sometimes time is always of the essence, and you can't always give you want, when you put your stamp of approval on there, it means something, right? So that's the most I think important part for me.
It's your word,
exactly. All right, so let's move into Dewhurst security. So I've always been intrigued by how things have gone for you since leaving a full-time kind of paid position into actually running your own security consultancy. And I know 2014, that's when you set off to do it. So how were the early days, 2014? What were you worried about? What were the kind of pain points when it came to kind of starting your own kind of small consultancy at that time?
Yeah, so it was a huge risk. So my first my son was born. He must have been 6 months old or something. So leaving a full-time paid job, my first and only ever professional job up until that time. I'm also living in France. Just moved to France a couple of years earlier. So yeah, it really was a big risk. So I was working at Random Storm at the time. So I let the bosses there know that I wanted to leave and start working for myself. I'd always wanted to work for myself, and yeah, it was a logical step for me. So I let the bosses there know, and I was lucky enough. With hindsight, maybe I wouldn't have survived if they hadn't decided to hire me as a freelancer. So when I left, they're like, okay, yeah, we respect your decision. Would you be willing to freelance for us? And I didn't anticipate that at all. I thought, like most companies, if you say you're going to leave, they just chuck you out the door. They don't want to see you again. But I was so lucky that they wanted to give me work still as a freelancer, and I really think that without that, I wouldn't have had a chance to survive at that point. I did think that because I was known through DVWA, that perhaps it would be easier for me to find clients and things like that. But it was a long and difficult process to find new clients. Eventually, I found so many clients that I stopped working for Random Storm as a freelancer. So obviously, I was giving them a a cheaper rate at first, as you do when you first start freelancing, and then eventually you put your day rate up. So yeah, I was lucky enough then to get other clients as my work started to, as WPScan started to take off. I started to get a lot of WordPress related clients, or WordPress plugins and that kind of thing, code reviews. So yes, I was really lucky, and I very much thought I would have survived if Random Storm hadn't have wanted to hire me as a freelancer at that time.
Got it. So we'll move on to WPScan soon, but I just wanted to, obviously, I know you're not really like, you have kind of transitioned out of like running Dewhurst Security now in some regard. You're now kind of full-time on WPScan, but like I think we talked about it yesterday before the stream died, and we were talking about Mario Hedrich, where he released a kind of a YouTube video, which I'll share with the chat, around how to start your own security consultancy. But from your perspective, what would you recommend as someone, if they wanted to, like, for example, get into like running their own kind of consultancy firm, or like small business, like any kind of tips you may want to provide someone in InfoSec space?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big risk, but there are plenty of rewards. For example, the money side of things definitely, is you're going to have more income than if you worked for someone else. And if you're like me, I'm not very good with authority, so working for myself without a boss. I mean, some people class clients and customers as bosses, but it's not the same thing really. So yes, I'm not great with authority, so I've always wanted to work for myself. So for me, it was pretty logical thing to do. But yeah, I mean, if you really want to do it and you're prepared to take on the risks, I mean, there's always a risk that it's not going to work. But then at the same time, you can always just find another job anyway, right? I mean, you can give it a go for 6-12 months, as long as you have enough money to save up to pay your bills for that amount of time. And yeah, just go for it. I think yeah, if that's something that you really want to do, you should definitely go for it. And yeah, you get the freedom of working for yourself, so you can work, especially in this job, security, web application security testing. You can work from anywhere you want. So I'm living in France at the moment, and yeah, you can choose what type of work you want to take on, and maybe, for example, I did have one instance where a client came to me wanting me to test like a really it's like a spammy website. I don't know. It's just a horrible, like, scammy. When you do a pen test this website, like really against everything I believed in. So when you're working for yourself, you have the opportunity to decline that kind of work. Whereas maybe if I was working for a consultancy, I would have been forced to work for that client. So things like that are definitely good as well. Also, I hate repetitiveness. So I hate working 100% of the time testing. I love to change my day up by doing accounting, by talking to clients, by tweeting, by answering emails, that kind of thing. I like to break my day up with different things and not just be 100% of the time testing. So I think that for me as well was useful for working for yourself. And yeah, it was Dewhurst Security was super awesome, and we've moved some of those clients over to WPScan now. And yeah, Dewhurst Security now is just a holding company. We're not taking any more clients on over there.
That's interesting. So I guess my take from some of those aspects would be, obviously you get to work on a variety of things, which obviously is good because it keeps your brain from just going from like a burnt out state of just doing the same repetitive thing. And two, if you really want to get into it, it's usually worth the risk, but you probably want to have a safety net in some regard before starting it, like either client lined up or some type of previous cash flow to keep you afloat throughout the initial transition.
Yeah, and I think yeah, the biggest risks always, or most of the time, give the biggest reward as well. So I think, although there is a huge risk there, the reward is also huge. So yeah, you have to weigh that up, and it's down to the individual and their specific circumstances, whether they're ready to take those risks. But yeah, I think if you really want to do it, just go for it. I mean, there's, we've only got limited time here on Earth, so so don't waste it, basically.
Okay, let's transition to WPScan. So I guess I'm sure most people on the stream know what WordPress is, but some people might not know what it is. So could you just give let's just say explain what WordPress is, how WPScan came about, and what is it, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, so WordPress it started off as a blogging platform. So I can't remember what it was originally called, but it was originally called something else. And then Matt Mullenweg forked it because I think it might not be 100% correct, but the original developers abandoned it or weren't working on it, they weren't updating it, something like that. So Matt Mullenweg forked the original project and called it WordPress. So it's an open source blogging platform and has since evolved into a full content management system, so CMS. And even recently now with WooCommerce and that kind of thing, it's a great e-commerce platform as well. I can't remember the stats for WooCommerce, but it's very popular for e-commerce websites. So if you believe the statistics, which some companies put out, WordPress powers 39% of the web today. I'd take that number with a grain of salt, but it does prove that it is a popular platform. And if you compare it to other CMSs, so if you look at the market share between WordPress and other CMSs, WordPress is like way above, used more than any other CMS on the market as well. So it's not only is it popular on the web, but it's one of the most popular CMSs out there. So WPScan started, I had my own WordPress blog. So I think I was at university at the time and I was basically writing about what I'd learned at university or even working at Random Stone, what I was learning on the job and that kind of thing. So I like to share that, write blog posts and share that information. And one day I came across a vulnerability, an advisory about a vulnerability within WordPress that SecuriTEA researcher had made public. So I created a proof of concept for that for my own blog and ran it as my own blog. And then I thought, oh, that's cool. So I started looking into the other aspects of WordPress security and its inherent failings, and started to build out a tool which I called WPScan for that. So WPScan was released in 2011, June 2011. So it is a command line interface tool written in Ruby, and basically you give it a WordPress blog's URL. You hit enter and it will go and scan that WordPress blog for vulnerabilities such as configuration issues, information disclosure. It'll also do enumeration, so enumerate what plugins are installed on the WordPress website, what themes are installed, what WordPress version they're running. And this is all from an outside attacker's perspective, so all black box. And then we find, for example, that a plugin's installed on the WordPress website. We'll call our vulnerability database through an API, and we'll check if there are any known vulnerabilities associated with that plugin or theme or WordPress version and display that to the user. For the vulnerability data information, you will need an API token, which you can get free of charge, but we also have paid plans for that as well. And yeah, so we have the command line interface tool, we have the vulnerability database, which has an API on it. And we, most recently, we have our WPScan WordPress security plugin, which you can install on your WordPress blog directly.
So I guess with the WordPress plugin, that must have really increased the usage, because from a developer perspective, they're not going to be running like a CLI most of the time. They're going to be, installing it directly onto their, site itself, or maybe people that manage it. So I guess, from a security perspective, like someone like myself, I would probably be using the CLI, but I guess from a developer perspective, they would be using the actual plugin itself.
Yeah, definitely. So the CLI is the original intent. I created the command line interface for penetration testers, so for my peers. That's a very small market compared to the WordPress user market. So we released we only started really concentrating on the WordPress plugin, say in June 2020 last year, and that now uses our API more than the command line interface does. So in those terms, it's just in the last 6-7 months, it's more popular than or used more at least than the command line interface that we've been working on for 10 years. So we're happy to be we're happy to be in that space now, and hopefully we're going to grow the WordPress plugin and increase the user base even more.
That's crazy. So I'm just going to show like a quick statistic on the stream, and this is for the vulnerabilities this month and the API calls this month. So this is from you. This was on your LinkedIn from the WPScan blog. I know you might not be able to see it, Ryan, but it says new vulnerabilities this month is 47, and API calls this month is 8 million. Which I guess is like a very like crazy feat to like see like that many API calls in 1 month and that many issues, because it's not normally in the platform itself, it's normally in the plugins, but it obviously can be in the platform.
Yeah.
I want to ask you like a question which probably no one is probably going to ask you like outright. Like, how much effort is it to actually do like for WPScan in general? Like, how much time do you actually spend on, you know, because you have the vulnerability database that I assume is not, it has to be vetted somehow. You have, you know, obviously the platform that you're maintaining, the plugins that you're maintaining, and you have a very small team. So like there's, you know, I guess there's 2 other core contributors, three contributors.
Two full-time employees, yeah, including myself.
Got it. Yeah. So yeah, could you just give me some insight into that?
Yeah. So the statistics you mentioned are from January. We're in February now, so that's from January. So yeah, I think it was like 47 vulnerabilities and 8.5 million API calls, which come from our WordPress command line interface scanner. They come from our WordPress plugin, and they also come from our enterprise clients, so hosting companies and other security plugins. So yeah, it is a lot of work. So I started on working at WPScan full time just on the 1st of October 2020. Before that, it was all done in my free time. My colleague, my 2 colleagues' time as well. So me and another colleague started full time on the 1st of October, and we have another colleague. It doesn't work. He's not officially working full time on WPScan, but you know, he does put a lot of work. He does as much work as we do. And yeah, so it's right now it's 2, almost 3 people's full-time job. On the vulnerability database itself, it's mainly Erwan, my colleague who works on that. And yeah, it's a lot of work. So we get there's a number of ways we find vulnerabilities, right? We scour the web looking for blog posts or tweets that people may make regarding vulnerabilities. We also have a submission form, so security researchers can submit vulnerabilities directly to us. And all these vulnerabilities, all this vulnerability data or advisories are various states of quality, right? So you can get some which might be very vague, and we have to try and pick that apart and find out is there a vulnerability there, or is this just made up? You'd be surprised how many advisories out there are from one plugin's competitors to the other. So they're trying to discredit their competitor by putting out fake security advisories. We've come across that before, and that kind of information we don't want to be propagating through our database. So the first thing we do when we receive, say receive a submission from a security researcher, we'll try to contact the vendor of when I'm talking about security issues here and vulnerabilities in WordPress, I'm mainly referring to its plugins, right? So in our database, 86% of our vulnerabilities are attributed to a WordPress plugin, not WordPress core or its themes. So 86% of vulnerabilities in our database are WordPress plugins. So once we get a submission, what we'll do is we'll try and contact the vendor of that WordPress plugin. We'll give them a couple of days to respond. Before that, let me go back. So we will verify the issue first. So we'll read through it, and if it looks technically sound, we'll contact the vendor. it doesn't look technically signed, or if it's a bit vague, we'll install the plugin on a local installation and try to replicate the vulnerability first. We'll give the vendor a couple of days to respond. If they don't respond in a few days, we'll then escalate the issue to WordPress themselves. We have a great relationship with WordPress. We're in constant contact with the WordPress plugins team as we're reporting vulnerabilities to them, mostly I'd say on a daily basis. Then WordPress decide to take an action on that. They may decide to contact the vendor themselves or try to contact them. Or if the vulnerability is serious enough and the data is already public, say on some other website, a lot of the times they'll just pull the plugin from the WordPress repository, so no users can install it, vulnerable versions of the plugin. So it kind of limits the problem, if you will. And yeah, so then once there's been a patch, or we'll wait a few more days, see if there has been a patch, or WordPress comes back to us, and then we'll release the details on our vulnerability database. So every vulnerability that hits our database has been manually entered by a WordPress security professional, whether that's myself or Erwan. It can also be very helpful if a security researcher maybe is new to the area, might not understand it. They think they found a vulnerability, but might not understand it fully. So we're also a useful resource if you want to contact us for advice on a particular vulnerability, or they're not sure quite how severe it is. We can help them work out the severity and or help them maybe with a proof of concept or whatever. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Sounds like a lot of work.
To summarize, it's a lot of work.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions from there. So I saw recently that WPScan is now accredited to assign CVEs. How did that come about?
Yeah, so we're a CNA, a CVE numbering authority. We announced that, I think it was at the beginning of January, so we've been doing it for like say 6 weeks now. And so far we've assigned, I'm not sure the exact number, but it's around about 60 CVEs to WordPress plugin vulnerabilities so far. Yeah, so it's kind of in the back of my mind for a number of years. And was it last year or the year before? I was invited to Munich by Google, WPScan. I was there representing WPScan. And it was a CMS security summit in Munich, and a few of the heads of the other CMSs or people who had involved in the CMS security world were also invited. And yeah, there's a couple of people there who were going through the CNA process for their own CMSs, for like I think Drupal maybe a CNA as well. And yeah, so I got the idea there. I never really thought that it would be possible. Like I thought, nah, that's going to be too difficult, or they're never gonna trust it, or whatever. We're not big enough, or that kind of thing. So I thought, I'll give it a try anyway, see what happens. And then I went through the process, which you get tested on. It's quite a rigorous process, and then you based on your results, you get accepted or denied. And we got accepted, and a few weeks later, we started assigning CVE numbers to plugin vulnerabilities.
It's really cool.
We're super happy because like hardly any plugin vulnerabilities actually get signed CVEs, because there's just so many, and not many researchers request them. And I assume MITRE are also very busy assigning CVEs for all the other software. So yeah, we're super happy to be able to do that.
Now, my follow-up question, and then we'll move into some live demos, is most of the vulnerabilities extend from the plugins themselves, and what obviously like just in January alone there was 47 assigned, 47 new vulnerabilities in plugins. Mm-hmm. What is anything happening in that space to kind of like try and like improve the overall security posture of these plugins? Or is it like just down to the discretion of the plugin creator of what they do? Is there no way like, people could either like create some frameworks or by default libraries that maybe like kind of interact with some of the components that are generally used within like WordPress?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and it's not trivial to do that. I think there are around about 70,000 WordPress plugins on the official plugin repository, and then you've got commercial ones after that. Just in our own vulnerability database, we have 90 plus thousand plugins. They're not all affected by vulnerabilities, but we're tracking 90,000 plus different WordPress plugins.
Because you obviously enumerate
yes.
as well, right? Because you
Sorry?
also enumerate as well through. That's part of the WPScan.
So these list of plugins can be used in the CLI to enumerate install plugins from a black box perspective. So yes, it's not a trivial problem to solve. With the WordPress plugin team, I don't know exactly how many there are working on that, but I'm assuming it's not many. So they will do a security review once for new plugins. When you want a plugin added to the official repository, they will do a security review, and they will knock it back if they find any vulnerabilities within it. The problem is, though, that's not 100% fail-safe. Obviously, reviewing code is never 100% effective. And I'm assuming their time and resources are also limited. I have no idea how many plugins they get submitted a day, but I can imagine that it's quite a few. So the problem with that is, so they do get an initial security review. Whether that's how in-depth that is, I don't know. But the problem is all updates to the plugin thereafter have no review at all. So I can send a plugin for review, a new plugin to be added to the repository, which will get reviewed. But then say a week later, I can push some code to my plugin, which is vulnerable, and that's not reviewed. And that can introduce a vulnerability at that time. So there have been efforts to, obviously there's people scanning the plugin code all the time. Security researchers, security companies like ourselves, we're constantly scanning, not an automated process, but now and then, if we have some downtime, we'll go, okay, let's look for whatever SQL injection across the plugin repository, and sometimes we find some. And yeah, as more and more security companies come into the WordPress space, more and more effort is being given to these, to this problem.
Okay.
If you just give me one second, sorry, there's someone at my. Just kidding. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
All right, and we're back.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. So yeah, it is plugin security. It's a difficult problem, and it is getting better. There are more and more people looking for vulnerabilities in plugins, and with efforts like our vulnerability database, we're keeping track and hopefully adding a bit of accountability to plugin developers by recording the issues in a database.
All right, so let's jump over to some actual usage of WPScan. Let's just because obviously there's the world there's the CLI, which I assume we'll see, and then if you could also just show us where the database lives as well, or whatever you want to show today. Sure. Whatever you want to show today is perfectly fine. So let's quickly move over to. Do you want to share your screen, Ryan?
Yeah, so I'll share my terminal there. Let me know if you can see it.
I can definitely see it.
Does that share on Twitch, or is that?
It's live. It's live on Twitch right now. Okay,
cool. Right. So yeah, demoing WPScan. So this is the command line interface tool, WPScan. So how do you install it? The first, if you have Ruby Gems installed, so I'm not sure it comes by default in on OS X or Linux. I think it might do. I'm not sure. Anyway, if you have Ruby Gems installed, you can simply run gem install WPScan, and that should take care of all the dependencies for you. WPScan also comes pre-installed in Kali Linux, Pen 2, and a few other pen testing distributions. So once you've installed it, simply run the WPScan command, and it should tell you to go help, hopefully. For some reason that's taken way longer than it should do. Why is that?
It's a live demo. These things always are interesting. Here we go.
Yeah, it is. There we go. We got some output finally. Yeah, so as it says, if you want some help, just type --help. Wow, that is slow, isn't it?
Probably because we're also sharing the screen or sharing the particular window.
Yes.
So we can either reshare or share the entire screen. If that, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there might be a lag between showing the command line interface output and my voice, but anyway, you can see, yeah, the help information here has all the different flags that you can use. So let's do a simple scan. So --URL will scan one of my blogs. So --URL and then the domain name that you want to scan.
Mm-hmm.
And just press enter.
The screen has gone a bit skewy on my.
Yeah. Okay. So now it's asking if I want to update the database. So this is, we call it the metadata database. So it's whether a WordPress plugin is being closed and its version. Yeah. Yeah, no worries.
1 second, everyone. Can I reshare the screen and see how that goes, everyone?
Yeah, right. So now it's asking if we want to update the database, and this is the metadata data. So it's stuff like the plugin version, whether it's still on the WordPress repository or if it's been closed or not. So the first thing to do is update the metadata database. Hopefully this shouldn't take too long.
Update completed. Very good.
Yeah, on my crappy ADSL line. And then it just starts the scan straight away. So as you can see here, it's giving you all sorts of different output. Some headers that it detected, Nginx and the version number. If XML RPC is enabled. So XML RPC is a WordPress API, which has been known to be vulnerable to various issues in the past. Some people recommend disabling it. Other people recommend leaving it enabled. My personal opinion is to disable that to lower the attack surface. We have the README file, which traditionally it used to give a very accurate version number, but in recent versions that has been stopped and it gives I think it's just a major version number now. Mm-hmm. We found a backup directory. Yeah, so as you can see here, there's a backup directory there. We give a reference for that, so if you want to look up further information. We detected that the site uses must-use plugins, which are a certain type of WordPress plugin. There's a file here that we've identified. We've identified the version of WordPress, which is 4.7.2. We tell you that it's insecure and the data was released. I'll tell you how we find that information. So according to this, we find it via the meta generator. So we have about 5 or 6 different ways to detect the WordPress version. And based on that WordPress version, we have identified 56 vulnerabilities that affect that version. So we have the title of the vulnerability. So the first one here is an authentic cross-site scripting via media file metadata. We have the CVSS score, which is a 5.4. So this is CVSS version 3. There we have the calculation. Just a quick note that this vulnerability data here, you will need an API key for. This is what our vulnerability database contains. So without providing an API token, you'll just get the version enumeration, and you won't get these vulnerabilities I put below. Another quick note: the CVSS version is, the CVSS score is only output for enterprise users. Starter and pro users don't get the CVSS score.
Got it.
We can see that the vulnerability was fixed in version 4.7.3, and then we've got a bunch of references here below. What else did we find? So these are all the WordPress versions. So it didn't find any plugins, but it did passive detection. So the way WPScan works is we've got passive detection, which is kind of like if you want to be stealthy, or a little bit stealthy even. And then we've got mixed, so use passive and aggressive methods. And then we have aggressive, which is where you don't care if you get detected or not.
Yep.
We find no backup files and some basic statistics there. So as you can see, I'm using the enterprise API plan. 2 requests were made during the scan, unlimited requests. So another thing about the command line interface tool, you can output in JSON. So if you want to automate scanning, say against 1,000 WordPress websites, you can output that to JSON and then feed that into another tool. For example, the Dewhurst framework, pentest reporting framework, supports WPScan JSON output, so you can upload that to Dewhurst, and it will make a pretty report out of it for you.
With this as well, you can do, from a pen tester side of things, like when you're, obviously have authorization. For the free plan, you get 15 requests, right? Or 15 API queries.
25.
25, sorry. So 25, so you can do 25 scans. Is that a day or is that a week?
So it's 25 API calls per day.
Per day. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And you gave me some statistics that most websites tend to only have about, less than, is it 15 plugins? Or
so the latest research is that the average website has 22 plugins installed. So that's 50% of all WordPress websites have 22 plugins installed or less.
Got it. So if someone was to use WPScan today with the free tier, they technically could scan one website and still not consume their entire scan for that day.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's rare to find. It's 50-50, I guess. But yeah, I mean, in my personal experience, a WordPress website, a basic one, has a handful of plugins installed. So you could definitely use the free version to scan the same website multiple times. But yeah, certainly there are cases where the website will have 22 plugins or more installed, and then you will need to purchase more API calls, or just wait till the next day and do a free scan again the next day.
Got it.
Yeah. So I do have. I'd like to show as well the user guide. So can I share another screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So I stop this screen, or can I just?
Yeah, you can.
I can change.
I think you can just change the window. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Here we go. Yep.
So can you see that?
We can see that. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So I want to show you now our user guide. So if you are not familiar with WPScan, the command line interface, if you want to get up and running quickly, if you go to our GitHub page and go to our wiki here, we have some user documentation here, and this will go through everything, not everything, but it will help you get up and running. So we've got installation information, Docker, Homebrew, how to update, how to use the API token, giving an explanation of how many API requests you'll need, or different enumeration modes, which I touched on a little bit. We have a little cheat sheet here to get you started.
You may want to just pause for 1 moment until the stream catches up. I think it's struggling a little bit with the connection, but give it a second. It eventually fixes itself from what we've been seeing.
Cool.
Nearly there.
And then you've got some troubleshooting information on there. A lot of security plugins will obviously block WPScan's user agent string, so we have a random user agent option, which will just send a random user agent. And surprisingly, that bypasses a lot of security WAFs and that kind of thing.
I could imagine. Like, I remember a test I did many years ago. I think it was when we were working together, and they were basically, you changed the user agent, you could see like so much more data. Like they were just, oh yeah, we blocked most browsers and we were only able to access it from an iPad. And I was like, oh okay, well actually, which is really interesting. Okay. So is there anything more you can show us on the WPScan site, or is it more like with the access? Can you access the database these days through just browsing the site, like see like what type of data is there in the catalog?
Yeah, so this is the WPScan main website, so WPScan.com. Is that loaded yet on your side?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, so it says here we're cataloging 21,940 WordPress core plugin and theme vulnerabilities. You can do a search. So let's search for, I don't want to call out any particular plugin here. Let's call out our own plugin. Okay, so like the first one that came up, I'm not being biased in any way.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, so here we have vulnerability, modern events, calendar lights, the affected versions, and the type of vulnerability. So an authenticated stored cross-site scripting. We have a description here. We have some notes by the triage team, which in this case, I guess, was Erwan. Oh, and you shouldn't actually be able to see that right now, but anyway, you've seen it. Oh. Maybe we can blur that out in post.
I can. You might want to just ask Erwan to go and delete that. Sorry, my bad. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's fine. It's my own fault for browsing as
admin. Privileged access.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have the version that the issue is fixed in and the plugins that it affects. We have the CVE number, classification, so cross-site scripting, CVSS score. You won't be able to see that on the web interface unless you're an enterprise user. And then we have information about the original researcher, links, and whether we have manually verified the issue. So if we've installed it and ran the proof of concept, timeline. So it was added 5 days ago. It was last updated 3 days ago, and probably a bit sooner than that soon. So what's really interesting on the website is the statistics. So we have various statistics about our data. So as I mentioned before, we have like 90,000+ plugins that we're tracking, 22,000 themes, 483 WordPress versions, 88,000 of those, well, it's 89,000 of free plugins versus 2,000 paid or premium plugins. Number of CVSS scores given to our vulnerabilities, breakdown by component. So 87% of our vulnerabilities affect WordPress plugins and only 5% WordPress core. The number of vulnerabilities added this month of February, so we're on the 3rd of February today, we've added 4. The number of API calls has not been updated yet. That's updated every 3 days. And then you can see here vulnerabilities by year. So far this year, 2021, we've added 51 vulnerabilities.
Interesting. So I saw, like, could you just scroll back up to the free versus paid data, like from the statistics?
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting because that just kind of goes to show, like, maybe is there just because there's less premium plugins, or is it because people who are like pushing out free plugins are doing them quick and fast, and like security is sometimes not really an option for them because they just have to keep pushing to try and get more user base for their kind of services? Or
I think I don't know for sure, but I think there probably is less premium plugins than there are free plugins, but our data isn't also 100% accurate because it's much easier for us to enumerate free plugins than commercial ones or premium ones, because all of the free plugins are on one repository, which is the WordPress plugin repository, whereas the premium ones could be on tens of thousands of different websites. So yeah, I don't think our premium plugins tracking is super accurate. But yeah, I would instinctively say that there are probably less premium plugins to free ones.
Because that does make sense, because one, you'd have to pay for the plugin to begin with because it's a premium, and even like security researchers who are reporting vulnerabilities to you generally aren't going to pay for like a premium service, especially when there's probably no bug bounty for most of these plugins too, right? So like it's less incentive for someone to actually pay for it, and the only time they may find vulnerabilities is one, if they stumble across it in the wild, or they're using it for their own kind of gain. So that makes a lot of sense in many ways.
Yeah, and we also have problems ourselves with that, because we'll get a researcher send us a vulnerability that affects a premium plugin, and then we have no way to verify that without paying and downloading the plugin ourselves. In extreme circumstances, we can't pay for everyone because we wouldn't have a viable business. So in extreme circumstances, I will, if it's like a very serious vulnerability affecting a very popular premium plugin, I will go and pay for that to verify the issue. Sometimes we can ask for refunds afterwards if that's a possibility. But yeah, we do have problems with verifying issues occasionally in premium plugins. So sometimes we just have to look at the technical details and see if it's technically sound when it's a premium plugin.
Nice. So I guess the submit feature is where you submit issues in this, and I guess the API is just giving you, obviously there's some of these things may have sensitive data, so you may want to log out, I don't know, but
there's my email address if wants to email me. So there may be some things here that you're going to see which might not necessarily be available to non-admin users. So yeah, that's the submit form. So you put in your details if you want to get recognition for that. You can also do so you don't have to give your name if you don't want to. These are required fields, so title, vulnerability type, brief description, proof of concept, that's optional, URL, CV, exploit DB are different. YouTube videos are quite useful for us. We'll actually render the YouTube video on the vulnerability page, so you can watch it directly from our website.
Interesting.
And yeah, once you submit that form, it goes to a back end. We have a really in-depth reporting system on the back end. That's where most of the work goes on. And then we can like assign the vulnerability at different states, like pending or vendor contacted. And we can add notes to the vulnerability and that kind of thing to help us manage them more easily on the back end. On the API page here, just give you a quick overview of the different plans that we have. So we have the free there at 25 API requests a day, starter at €5 a month, professional at 25 a month, and then enterprise starts at 2,000 per year and then goes up from there.
Got it.
And there's various information here on how to use the API directly, because a lot of our users may use the command line interface tool, others our WordPress plugin, but then you may also just want to query the API directly, and you can certainly do that. You just need to give your API token and hit the correct API endpoint. And this is the type of data you'll get back from the API endpoint. It's the raw data in JSON format. As mentioned previously, some of this data is restricted to enterprise users. So the proof of concept and description is restricted to enterprise users, and the CVSS score.
Got it. All right. Very cool. So there are obviously more features to the pen testing side of things too. Like you have things like, maybe it's changed since I last used it because it's been a while since I've tested a WordPress site. But like you used to have things like the brute force, if it would enumerate usernames, like from particular things, it would brute force. Are those types of things still in the WordPress, like actual CLI itself still?
Yes, there's a list of things here. What the command line interface tool will do. So yeah, we certainly still do brute forcing. We have two methods for that. So we do traditional web HTTP login form, and we'll also do XML RPC brute forcing. The cool thing about that is I'm not sure if it's been fixed or if you can still be able to do it. You can basically send like one HTTP request with like say, for example, 100 login attempts. So that significantly speeds up the brute force process. So for every one, say, HTTP request to the XML RPC interface, you can try 100 different passwords for that user. So it's a lot faster. But that's you're relying on XML RPC being enabled in that case. I'm not sure if that particular issue has been fixed yet. It's been a while since I looked at it. But yeah, you can do username enumeration, which WordPress themselves don't consider a security issue. Personally, I wish they would, because it does aid in password brute forcing.
Correct.
We look for backed up config files. A lot of the times, if you use Vim, for example, or Nano to edit your WP config file, you won't necessarily notice. It will create a shadow backup file of that file, which may be accessible over the web. And obviously that includes your secret keys, which WordPress uses to create your CSRF nonces, and I think it's used also for the salt for your password and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And lots of other miscellaneous small things like error logs being exposed, database dumps. So a lot of people just do a backup of the database to their web root, and we'll try and guess the name of that and see if it's available for download.
I mean, obviously you have things like if user registration is enabled, because, for most sites, they don't want that enabled, because you might be able to register a new user that can then log in and take a look at the themes and modify things, which can be quite bad. So
definitely.
So obviously this is very useful for if obviously you need to have authorization to test the site, but for things like bug bounties, for anyone that is running, any organization, if you take a look at most organizations, they're going to have a lot of people running CMSs. It could be Drupal, it could be WordPress, and they're going to be using these for marketing campaigns. They're going to be using them for lots of different services, sometimes even obviously for blogging platforms, etc. So it's definitely something that's never going to go away anytime soon. And as I believe Ryan said, at least obviously it's a ballpark figure, but about 30% of the web appears to be using WordPress, which is a crazy number. Anything more than 5% is huge, to be honest. So,
yeah.
Cool.
And just on the user registration thing in WordPress, so we do get a lot of vulnerabilities, privilege escalation vulnerabilities, or that could be used for privilege escalation. So if a WordPress website does allow registration, maybe the vulnerability can't be exploited by an unauthenticated user, but then if you're able to register a low privilege user, it might be possible to exploit that and gain high privileges, such as administrator user role. So it's also dangerous in that sense as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop, unless you have anything you want to show on the CLI. Otherwise, I think we're probably good to close everything out. A
quick message to bug bounty hunters and people that do report vulnerabilities. WordPress administrator users are allowed, it might seem counterintuitive, but they are allowed to inject JavaScript into pages and blog posts and that kind of thing. And we do get a lot of submissions about from security researchers believing that is a cross-site scripting vulnerability, when in fact WordPress security model allows that. So yes, if you do find cross-site scripting, try and reproduce it as a low privilege user. Or what you can also do is disable that feature. So if you look at our user on our wiki on the WPScan GitHub repo, you can disable administrators from being able to do that. So if you can reproduce the vulnerability with that disabled, then you have a real vulnerability. But it's worth checking.
I think that's a very important comment, because a lot of the time people will think that, when you go to like Google has their own kind of blogging platform too, right? And they also say that cross-site scripting there is not a problem. And the fundamental part is that it is a CMS. You're allowed to inject JavaScript, because you can either normally go into a column that has add analytics. You're including JavaScript there. Obviously it might not happen in WordPress, but in reality, ultimately those things aren't really classed as vulnerabilities. It's only problematic when you can do it when either something is not supposed to be intended, like either disabling the feature or doing it from an unauthenticated state from a plugin that obviously then renders that data back as HTML, which probably shouldn't have happened. So it's really obviously important to differentiate when you're testing for vulnerabilities, what is an issue and what isn't an issue.
Definitely. I think as well, there is one case where cross-site scripting as an administrator is an issue in WordPress, and that's when it's XSS in a GET request and it doesn't contain a CSRF nonce. In that case, crystallization is a vulnerability there. But if it does contain a CSRF nonce and it is validated on server side, then that isn't an issue either. So yeah, there are some caveats there. And yeah, you can't just log it in as administrator, enter script alert one into a comment box and then get a pop-up, and then yeah, it's more caveated than that.
Well, Ryan, I know it's just been over an hour, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I do appreciate all of the time that you've spent today talking about your background, showing us about WordPress. And I think if you've never used WPScan before, like, it's a fantastic tool to basically look for different types of vulnerabilities. I can guarantee you, if you're doing any type of bug bounty program, and you take a look at the source in many of these subdomains, you're going to see references to -WP content or WP something which has all of these different things. So again, Ryan, I do appreciate your time. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I'm glad you're doing well.
Awesome. Thank you, Lewis.
All right, cheers. I'm just going to close out, and then we will the conversation. So yeah. Thank you everyone for checking out today's stream. This is the SecuriTEA and Crumpets podcast, where we had Ryan Dewhurst talk about WPScan. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and also seeing WPScan in action. And I look forward to seeing you in March, where we'll have Pwn function on to show some more weird web function goodness.